before the pandemic, we had 3,000 users. Starting in the beginning of this year, we had 20,000 users in January, and now we have 120,000 users. And so literally, like, we acquired, I think it was like 7,000 users of organic people. It was a type form on our site, which is want to learn tennis. We gained over 7,000 signups organically on want to learn tennis.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Trisha Goyal, founder and CEO of Break the Love. In this episode, we discuss the company's racket sports marketplace. Trisha talks about using technology to make activities like tennis and pickleball more accessible. Plus, we discuss the keys to brand building and impactful partnerships. Let's get into it. Hi, Trisha. Welcome to Fitt Insider.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat today. You got a lot of cool stuff going on. So I think maybe just to kick things off, why don't you give us the quick intro about you and Break the Love, and we'll get into some of the details and strategy behind it.
That sounds great. So my name is Trisha, and I'm the founder of Break the Love. Break the Love, for those who don't know, is an online marketplace that connects people with recreational racket sport activities across underutilized spaces. Prior to starting the company, I used to lead digital product at ESPN, HuffPost, and Giphy. So had a lot of experience on the digital product side. And it was when I was at ESPN, I wanted to get back into playing a sport. I was a huge, boutique fitness fan, Peloton user, like definitely an avid, fitness enthusiast. And I wanted to get back into playing a sport. For me, it was tennis. And what I saw was that there were a lot of other friends that worked with me that, saw that there was a lot of friction to being able to play a sport as their form of getting active outdoors, because there's just a few more hurdles that it takes to, play a sport than going out and running and cycling. And those things include, you need people to play with, you need a place to play. Sometimes you need equipment. And also too, it's typically a little bit expensive to, make it all happen. And so really, if you don't have like those first three things, you're going back to running and cycling. That's just what it is. And then the fourth, when it comes to just cost, many people grow up playing a sport like in, a high school PE class, or, it usually is baked into kind of your education. And so spending up for it as an adult is definitely a bit of a sticker shock for many, and especially for Gen Z and millennial consumers. And so really Break the Love, this whole platform that we really set out to create was really to lower the friction and actually be able to make outdoor recreation and fitness and sport more accessible outside that brick and mortar model, essentially, that exists with traditional boutique fitness models out there.
Yeah, it's almost, as you're talking about it, in some ways making this recreational, in your case, racket sports, bookable in the class format of boutique fitness, right? So that you show up and all of those things that you need are there, which is even at this point significantly lacking across, you kind of name the sport. It's basically on you to figure out, to organize, to get people to come. And not to mention, do you need instruction? Do you need somebody to keep score? Do you need like all these things that go along with it? So yeah, before we get too far into it, at this point, how long has it been? When did you start? How far along are you? Anything to kind of give us a sense of how you got kind of up and running and where things are now?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2019. That's when I started it. And so it's been a few years now. And so since launching 2019, right before the pandemic was in full swing, we now have over 120,000 users on the platform. We're in 9 states across 41 cities. And we offer tennis, pickleball, paddle sports as well. So really kind of the range of racket sports on the platform. And we've worked with some really amazing partners to really help us scale and add value to our community throughout the 3 years that we've been working on this, including the likes of American Express, Wilson, and more.
Yeah. And then when you talk about the platform or the marketplace ecosystem, what does that experience look like when somebody goes in to use it? And then how are you kind of engaging them throughout that experience?
Yeah, great question. So the way that our platform works is really a combination of almost a meetup.com meets a mind body booking platform. So someone can go on our site, they can take a player profile quiz to get a sense of where their baseline level is. And from there, they get curated really kind of offerings that, they can access, from book a class to the point that we talked about, to book a tournament or competition to book a space for you and your friends to go and play. So really the range is pretty wide now in terms of what we offer. And once you play, if you're in a moderated experience, i.e. like a class or a tournament or some level where there's like it's more organized, that experience you'll actually get our kind of our affiliate providers or our court providers. Basically they are actually capturing data on like your level and all these different things that we're able to then use to feed back more personalized recommendations throughout the journey of essentially a customer on our platform. And so that's a really kind of great use case when it comes to just like that class format that we were talking about. But on the flip side, let's say you go to a class or let's say you just want to find a player to play with. We actually have a messaging platform as well where you can actually message other people. And then let's say you find somebody, you can then book a court essentially on the platform and go out and play. And so we really wanted to kind of build this like the perfect platform that really my team and I all wish existed in the marketplace, in the market, which is, the ability to find places to play and meet people to play with and be able to do that in a single platform.
When you're talking about this platform and thinking about all the things that you would want to have as part of that experience, the messaging, the classes, the court, it seems to me, right, I'm not obviously as deep in the space as you, but being interested in kind of sports recreation and even the kind of class booking component of it, I can recall a number of different times, a number of different companies that have kind of had this same approach, right? And I think a lot of them initially, well, even from the meetup version of it, was just like connecting you with another person and then like you kind of figure it out. And then there was the you can book a court, right? So they want to make the courts more discoverable and they somehow want to engage you and make sure that when you get there, like you have access to be able to play. And now this Break the Love, taking it and saying like, how do we do kind of like the end-to-end experience and then capture that information about you, make sure that you continue to be engaged. I guess my question is, what is it that you're doing differently that it's not going to kind of go the way of some of these other platforms? Or what did you see when you kind of looked at the landscape and said, this is how we're going to go about it to make sure that, we're successful?
So there's a lot of platforms from, to your point, player matchmaking apps to, booking software in the market. It's across both fitness and tennis sport that's, either has been there in the past or has, popped up recently. And I think the big difference is that, I'm a technologist and a product person at heart. While the technology is so important, at the end of the day, it's a marketplace. And really what you're looking to get is a critical mass of users on your platform and a ton of courts and providers who are going to provide these services on your platform. And if you don't have a lot of both, the marketplace won't work. And so the big thing that we always kind of thought about is how do we get a ton of users on our platform so that the odds of you finding a player in your geography are high, right? And then on the flip side for courts and providers, right? Providers can be a few different flavors. They can be public parks, they can be traditional brick and mortar clubs, they can be individual, independent pros that run classes across different types of real estate, right? Like it can be hospitality groups. There's the range is pretty high. Here on the supply, it's like how do we just get as much supply as possible and make sure, right, those two are always in equilibrium. And I think that is the piece that we always focused on. I would say almost we took a very like MVP growth hacking approach to our platform before building everything. So in the early days, it was myself and two engineers, and that's what it was. And it was like, okay, cool. Like I'm gonna start like trying to get as much demand as possible. And when I had demand, it's like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to go and get supply. And so I think overall, like we really like built the demand and supply before building a ton of tech around it, because that really enabled us just to move at a super fast rate once you have both essentially in place. And other platforms that have typically kind of exist in the market, they have almost built their product and technology as this like perfect rocket ship. But then when it comes to right the dollars and cents of acquiring supply, acquiring demand, like they have none left to kind of spend to get that marketplace to work. So I think really for us that's always been our focus, is always ensuring that we have an equal amount of supply and demand on the platform.
Yeah, and that's with the marketplace, right? You're kind of servicing these two different audiences, and you mentioned, yourself, and then working with two engineers. Is it at the onset, and even now as it's evolved, what works from like the demand generation and going out and getting suppliers? Are you hitting people up, going kind of one by one? Are there specific channels that you're able to either acquire users or partners kind of probably not at scale, but maybe in bulk, that it's not individual, like one by one partnerships. What does that, kind of building the chicken and the egg aspect of this look like?
Yeah, so I think another piece that I definitely did not touch on is also a little bit of a supply focused approach. So, meaning a lot of platforms kind of that we've seen in the market really spend a lot of time on the demand consumer pain points first. But the tough thing is there's a reason probably why this market of suppliers haven't come online, right? And so in the early days, I was really focused on building relationships with your, door to door, mom and pop directors of a tennis club, owners of tennis courts, like just really understanding that market, understanding what are the pain points and what do their economics look like. And once I understood that, it was really like, okay, I need to create a playbook that is going to, have a solution that is going to solve my consumer pain point, but also provide value to my supplier, to my supply kind of side of the marketplace. And so initially I did go door to door. That's how it started. I built case studies and from there took those case studies and started talking to, maybe medium sized kind of players in the supply market that had more scale of spaces for me to bring on the platform and really kind of working my way up to being able to again have case studies prove that we could drive demand, lower costs and drive revenue for a property owner and just kind of building up that trust on the supply side. On the flip side, when it comes to demand generation, for us, actually, the shutdown was a pretty big time when a lot of businesses were struggling. Obviously, tennis before things started opening up a little bit was in lockdown, especially in a city like New York City in the beginning. But in that time, we're like, okay, like we aren't able to serve, we're not able to generate revenue, we're not able to like service things that are happening. But what we can do is use this as an opportunity to build up demand. And so for us, we focus on a lot of just kind of collaborations and kind of concepts online with Instagram, with just like different growth hacking channels online that kind of revolved around tennis, fitness, activity to just acquire users that were interested in that space in the first place. And so that was the initial start. And then we actually saw, okay, like it was end of April, we noticed that in Sweden, actually, tennis and golf were the first two things to open up. And that's when we were like, okay, cool. Like, this is going to open up soon. Tennis courts will open up soon because it's already happening elsewhere in the world where this is the category that's opening up first. So then we started also going through all the suppliers and calling, hitting them up. What was really great at the time was that courts were willing to take an online call versus having to go physically door to door. And so you could do a high volume of calls and convert a high volume of courts onto your platform. So really actually using that, very tough time for many people, including myself personally. I think everybody went through a very distressing time, but using that time actually just to build up as much demand and as much supply. And then kind of in the process from then, from the shutdown to now, we've really been focused on partnerships with like-minded companies and brands that enable us to drive more demand to the platform with some level of scale in the process.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about the partnership piece. But as you're describing this, and I think it makes a ton of sense that, you're going through the shutdowns. People aren't allowed to go and play and congregate. And, not that, that makes as much sense now in hindsight that like, we maybe could have been out there playing and being in the sun and kind of breathing fresh air, but not being able to do that. And then thinking about, oh, how do we reach these people? How do we build a brand that resonates with them and engage them through Instagram or whatever channels from like the consumer demand side? How do you think about that consumer? There's people engage in sports for all different types of reasons, something fun to do, they're competitive, they want to learn something, they want to get a workout in. Age range spans pretty far in both directions. How do you think about, hey, this is who we want to serve and this is how we went about conveying that brand and value proposition to them?
So when it comes to kind of initial scale, we actually first started with college athletes, like former college athletes,
Mm.
because it was easier to identify them. Essentially, we were like, okay, cool. Like if you are like it's just easier to go to a roster and bring those people as your ambassadors to then grow to their friends, right? And to kind of create some momentum, just again, some level of like kind of micro scale when it comes to the initial traction. That being said, what we realize is like that person is usually not our initial customer. Our actual customer is somebody who maybe played a JV or high school sport, a JV or varsity high school sport, stopped playing in college like altogether and invested in boutique fitness classes or outdoor activities in general or their general wellness. And that's probably actually our customer. And so, really, initial scale, when you are acquiring lots of users, not all of them are necessarily your exact customer, but they can help you, right, get more brand awareness to eventually get to your right customer. And so, once the shutdown was, things started opening up. Tennis was one of those categories that started opening up. And that's when we started seeing a ton of beginners, a ton of amateurs, people who maybe did play before, but then gave it up. And we realized that, okay, like our platform actually just following the data is definitely geared towards somebody who wants to be active or wants to be outdoors or wants to socialize in a way that's not, candidly like a happy hour and wants to change it up and do it in just some different way. And that's really what we saw, organically on our site. Candidly, we, before the pandemic, we had 3,000 users. Starting in the beginning of this year, we had 20,000 users in January, and now we have 120,000 users. And so, literally, like we acquired, I think it was like 7,000 users of organic people. It was a type form on our site, which is want to learn tennis, and like literally, we gained over 7,000 signups organically on want to learn tennis. So that was a pretty clear indicator for us that like this market is definitely the initially like the casual player. That is our job, by the way, to hopefully get hooked into becoming a more repeat consumer, if that makes sense, or a more repeat player in the tennis, pickleball, paddle sport space.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a ton of sense. It's interesting. You can kind of tell me how you think about it, but as I was, discovering the company and kind of following along, it resonated with me in terms of pursuing the opportunity just in that, the same way that Lululemon did with yoga and hosting classes in their stores and building that community. And, in a way, Gymshark did this with like that younger, like bodybuilder or like starting to strength train, outside of the boutique fitness studio. Of course, like Outdoor Voices did this with like their fun runs and like doing things and playing, like having fun, being like a recreationalist. When you think about the brand, how do you kind of manage, I guess, how do you manage everything that's going into this from you're building supply and demand, you're building this brand that has to resonate with a very specific audience, you're continuing to forge the partnerships, which we'll talk about. So how are you doing each of these things, and maybe how are you able to like spearhead or move them along while, making sure that the rest of the company is running?
That's a great question. So in terms of the brand, I should definitely preface the fact that I started the company initially like as a way to solve my own pain point when I was at ESPN. And from a brand perspective, a big thing that, candidly, as a diverse female, like I didn't feel like any tennis club or sports club or any really sports property resonated with someone like me and someone like me and my friends, essentially, right? And so that a big thing that we kind of always focused on is like, could there be a friendly sports club energy? Like, could it be friendly, or could someone ask a dumb question to us and not be judged, right? And so I think that's something that was always so core to the company, because the company started off as really a pet project meetup when I was at ESPN, until I saw some real, just looking at the data, I was like, wow, there's some real legs to this. So I think from a brand ethos perspective, that has always been just core to our DNA, is that we to some degree are looking to reinvent, the sports club. And kind of, we always say it internally, we're always nervous to say it a little bit externally, but really on a mission to break the country club model. That's always just been core to our brand, and it's been core to our team's mission, if that makes sense, where it's like, could anybody access a sport, no matter where they come from, what experience they come from, their ethnic background, economic, socioeconomic background, all of that. That has always been just so core to who we are as a company. Like our team is 100% like female and or a minority, which is I think pretty rare. That's like a really rare thing to see in any sports company, or let alone sports and tech. So I think that's just always been a core to our brand and who we are as a company, from just kind of maintaining the brand ethos. And when it comes to partners that we work with, if they don't really fall into that ethos, we don't work with them. And that's just what it is. Like we can't, because for us, that dilutes, our entire messaging. We haven't really done paid advertising. That's not really been core to our growth. It's always been really word of mouth referral And so, yeah, I think that's in terms of like all of our marketing, like the voice, the tone, all of it has always been like, I always think about Disney, like, how could you just create like this like whimsical, magical experience without us when we don't own the real estate and we don't own kind of the exact infrastructure when you walk in to the space. And the way that we can do that is through all of our messaging, all of our email campaigns, all of our marketing, like every single even customer service email you get has a certain tone to really kind of delight and provide value to the end user. When you think about Gen Z, like they are savvier and smarter consumers than ever before. And so for us, we also cater to being kind of an education hub as well, where we get emails where, what do you recommend as my first racket? I just spent $150 on Amazon on something, on a cool one, and I can't hit a ball with it. Like, so like we get emails like that and we answer them with no real revenue metric tied to it. I think that has really boded well for us when just building a brand from the minute we started, in 2019. So to answer that question, brand has always just been core to who we are. And I've always wanted, just again, like my friends who used to ask Trish, like, how do I start getting into tennis? I'm really nervous to ask. Like, I don't want anybody to be nervous to ask. I want them to be able to come roll up to our site and be able to ask any dumb question and not be judged. And that's what we want. And so, and we want to do it, in a scalable way. And over time, we've been able to find really scalable ways to do that. So that's kind of on the brand in terms of just managing, brand, supply acquisition, demand acquisition. And obviously our team is that, while we started with myself and a couple engineers, we are now still lean, but we are six. And I think kind of when I think about being lean, I think it's actually a really competitive advantage for us because it has forced us to make sure everything that we do does scale. And so I think, those who kind of, there's, the concept of like hiring a lot of bodies like into a startup and into companies to grow. And for us, I think we've been, really focused on how do we make sure that our model has playbooks that can scale. And if it can't scale, like we can't continue doing it. So focus has been really core to like how we think about all of our growth across demand, supply, operations, maintaining the voice and the friendliness and being your best friend across, all of our touch points has been really core to just like how we operate. We've always been, again, just like focused on creating playbooks at scale. I've been a part of a few startups, right? Giphy is one, HuffPost as well, was at ESPN when we acquired BAM Tech. And so I always too really wanted to be able to build a company that had a really scalable playbook from the get-go.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of really insightful like nuggets in what you just said, from the brand piece to the team piece to continuing to be authentic and ultimately like solve problems that you saw when you got into this that folks can definitely like dig into and think back on. I think the other piece of what you're saying, and we've kind of alluded to it, is like partnerships and how you do that in both an authentic but impactful way. And I think this goes with a startup in general, but specifically the things that you've talked about, building brand and having a lean team and making decisions that are authentic and, making sure they can scale. And now partnerships, these are all things that people talk about and everybody aspires to, but it's another thing to say like, oh, it's working and we can continue to stick to it and we know what the kind of outcome is. So from even the partnership perspective, when you say working with whether it's American Express or, I've seen different kind of the press releases, Fitt or Equinox, you name it, what are those partnerships kind of doing ultimately, and then how do you turn around and turn those consumers or supply courts, gyms, what have you, into like engaged customers and partners?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two sides of partnerships to your point that you alluded to, demand partners versus supply partners. And so when we think about, let's start with just supply partners. When we think about supply partners, it's very clear we're trying to increase the revenue, increase foot traffic, and lower their overhead with our technology and our demand. That's really all it comes down to for any supplier in this space that they're looking for. And so to the point that we initially kind of talked about is that initially I went door to door, but as time goes on, you're trying to get more scalable partners that allow you to expand faster as your demand grows at a faster rate. And so that's when you see things like Fit gyms or the Equinox, we're always looking to basically work with partners that give us scale in markets that we're starting to see a lot of growth in, or where we anticipate we're going to gain a lot of growth in certain points of the business. And so that has always been, core. I will say for us, we were definitely really conscious about when we would start going after more scalable supply partners, because a big risk that you run when you bring on supply partners, if you don't basically, again, do those three things: increase foot traffic, increase revenue, or lower their overhead, like, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose that supply partner. And so for us, we always knew that when you think about a scalable supply partner, if you don't do that, like, to lose a Fitt gyms because you can't drive demand, or do those three things I just mentioned, is a tough loss to want to swallow, candidly, as any company. So we never really started going after those scalable kind of medium-sized supply partners until we felt like we had enough value to offer, and we felt like our technology and our playbook, because at the end of the day, you're always iterating, you're always tweaking things, was enough to make sure that they would be in it with us. So I think for us with supply partners, that was a big thing. We're, again, focused on supply partners that will help us grow in markets that we see demand in. And then on, culturally, we are also looking for supply partners who are like, maybe they've tried other pieces of technology and they just didn't find it enough and they want to build with us. So whenever we're talking to potential, medium-sized supply partners, we are looking for, cool, like, would they want to also kind of like be our almost guinea pig, if that makes sense? Are they willing to do that? Because if they're not, like, this is not the time to start working with them. So that is something we definitely think about with supply partners. Demand partners. So we are a very data centric company, to the point of us wanting to always do things at scale. And if they don't scale, we don't do them. Initially, we never set out to really deeply do these big partnerships, because there is inherent cost actually when you do it, which is resourcing. You have to have an account manager, you have to have certain things in place to deliver on a demand partner, just like I kind of mentioned, to a supply partner. And you also have to make sure that there's enough value that you're getting when investing those resources back to the company. For us, going back to what we're hyper focused on, is getting a ton of users and a ton of suppliers. And if it's not doing one of those two things, it's not worth our time engaging with, actually, because it's all resources that you're kind of burning through every time you do a partnership. So initially, for us, what was interesting was we actually had a couple partners reach out to us first, which was really fascinating. It was during the shutdown. It was like a very small growing CBD brand, and they were like, "Hey, we want to like get our product in front of tennis customers because we believe they have muscle pain, joint pain, all these things." I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, why not? Let's experiment." And so we started experimenting. And what was so funny was that people really liked it. They liked being able to test, a CBD product on site. They liked being able to kind of just have like something that changed it up a bit. And we're like, okay, this is great, but it was still kind of a lot of work. And we're not really looking to build an experiential company. But what was funny was that we gained like 22% like kind of referral rates from that one single experience. So we were growing demand, even though it was like a super micro, case study. I was like, oh, this kind of like grew us. And it didn't at the time cost any hard dollar, if that makes sense. And then we started getting, for us, Wilson reached out to us. Tory Burch reached out to some of our initial partners. They reached out to us. We're like, okay, cool. Like, what is value to you? And we really started understanding, like, what is value to these companies. And on the flip side, that's when we were like, okay, cool. We know for us, value is demand growth, right? That's what it comes down to. And we were able to really structure kind of models with each of these partners that were either endemic to tennis or in racket sports, or they had some audience type of, prototype that matched a consumer that we wanted to get when doing a partnership. So to the point of, Wilson is so endemic to tennis and racket sports, like that. You think about Wilson, you're like, tennis, that's what you think about. And so that was a no-brainer. But then, I think after the first couple partnerships, we got a lot of inbound, actually. Like, we got a lot of inbound from different brands wanting to work with us. And candidly, we had to say no after a certain point, because again, we're a 6-person team. And at the time we weren't 6 people, it was like 4.5. And so so, we had to really measure like the unit economics of like, cool, if I have somebody spend X amount of hours on this partnership and I don't get, why, I can't do it. And so we've always been really like conscious about, what does a B2B partnership look like that adds value to our platform, which is supply and demand. And, for us, American Express, Wilson, all the things you see have done that. They have built us some level of credibility or market entry or something when it came to the demand side that helped us maybe fill courts that we needed to fill because we had a ton of supply in a certain geography, or helped us acquire a consumer that we're betting on that we don't have, but this other brand has. And so that was kind of how we always structure our partnerships. And to the point of juggling all of them, we do now have somebody who is like the filter to like all of these partnerships for me, so that I myself am not always that filter. And yeah, I mean, for us, in terms of, we have a team, or we make sure we do things at scale, and we're really focused and able to say no. I think that's something that a lot of founders do struggle with, is saying no to things that don't tie back to their core KPIs.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, though, that you have kind of people coming to you, the opportunities, the different partnerships, but at the same time, right, you don't want to reach and, like you said, either maybe compromise a partnership, especially on that supply side, or on the consumer side, the demand side, like just get distracted with like, yeah, this is cool, but like at the end of the day, what is this doing? It's just taking a bunch of time and energy.
Yeah, and we've seen. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of people in the space, and we've seen brands and companies invest dollars into all these different partnerships that they didn't see their KPI grow. And that's really disappointing, because, it can really drain your resources and get you distracted in a way that, when you kind of like retrospective that partnership, it's like, was it worth it? And the goal is really, hopefully, sometimes you do things that don't work. That's just the nature of running a startup. But I think the real key is to take those data points to inform future decisions, in general.
Yeah, it's a great takeaway. Maybe just a couple more questions before we get you out of here. As we were talking about this, and you talked about having started before the pandemic, the going through the shutdowns, and of course, kind of through that period, and now pickleball coming on the scene in a huge way, paddle, and just racket sports in general, tennis, kind of the resurgence. Do you think about, I guess to the point around distractions that we kind of covered, is it like, hey, how many different sports can we do if this tech works, if the playbooks work? Or is it like, hey, we're focused and we want to do racket sports and tennis, and that's where we're going to kind of focus?
So we started in racket sports. It's always been we've always taken this approach of, we have to be category focused, because there are so many players out there who've tried to build this marketplace, but because there's so many stakeholders, it's not a straight two-sided marketplace. It just isn't like it's like a three, sometimes to four-sided marketplace that you're actually running. And so for us to have technology that actually works across basically a three-sided marketplace is not an easy feat to do. And so for us, we knew we had to start category by category at a time in order to really build up, the trust and all of the feature sets, if you want to call it that, to scale this marketplace. So for us, we started in tennis. Just this year, we started, going into kind of ancillary categories, which include pickleball and paddle, essentially. And we do think about other sport categories for sure, just because we're seeing demand for it on both sides a little bit. We've seen, suppliers who come to us who are like, yeah, like I also have a golf course on my property, or I also have a basketball court on my property. And we're like, okay, like that's cool. Like, could that work? And so we are definitely thinking about category expansion, but we're thinking about it still on like a category by category at a time model based off of the data. And we're not really going to like go faster than what feels right, because again, once you enter and go to market, we've never really had the luxury of being a stealth company. We've always went into the market and just iterated and iterated and iterated. So for us, we now have learned from doing this in the tennis space, now pickleball space, that there is a learning curve always to understanding all of the data points that you need in the product to capture demand and capture supply. And so for us, we're really right now in kind of the learning phase of what could that look like in another sport? What sport would that even be that makes sense? But we do believe that our technology does lean well towards other sport categories, just given where, again, we're seeing demand on both sides of the marketplace.
Yeah, even to that point, as you're talking about it, I do think there's like this almost the kind of grass is always greener. It's like, oh, we see all this white space, we see this opportunity, so many different sports, but it's like, yeah, but if you get it right once and you are able to own at least a significant market share in the tennis space, especially among a specific consumer. It's like replicating those learnings versus going in and trying to redo it all over again for a new sport. Like, I think patience and listening to the customer is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I think patience is really key. I think it definitely can be done. It has been done. If we think about, Gym Pass, they started off with boutique fitness and then they, expanded into mental health apps, right? So
Mhm.
there definitely are ways to take, existing pieces of technology and expand it horizontally that we've seen as really great case studies. And so we believe that there's a world, but patience is definitely the key here.
Yeah, and I guess one more question on this kind of forward looking and getting into the new year, still being, which is crazy impressive, a 6-person team. What are you thinking about as key priorities? Hopefully starting off the new year strong now, all the kind of lingering effects of the pandemic behind us, and maybe the priorities or things that you're excited about as you ramp up there.
There are definitely a few things that we're excited about. One is definitely geographic expansion into the new year. We're looking to really get into more suburban markets. So, go into the burbs is what we say. A lot we've seen so many people from millennial and Gen Z, just these generations that are going outside of traditional urban centers. And we kind of were like, okay, cool. If that's what's happening, that's where the trends are. We want to be there as well. So definitely getting out of just being that urban, city based company is definitely something that we're really focused on to create more access to just a broader demographic overall to tennis, pickleball, paddle. Pickleball is huge. To the point of distractions for us, pickleball is definitely not a distraction because we always saw that growth during the shutdown. Tennis is a hard sport to play. Pickleball is a little less. And so for us, definitely like learning more and diving deeper a lot more into the pickleball space is for us a huge priority. And then lastly, that, something we're really excited about is just overall kind of doubling down on our mission to create more access, which, to the point, I feel like there's the convenience side, but there's also too the how do you make it, more affordable to play. And so, diving into just, employer benefit programs and finding ways for people to get kind of their outdoor recreation subsidized overall is something that we're really focused on just to, again, create more access and make it more affordable to play a sport.
Yeah, it's really cool. A ton of opportunity. And I think both those things, from geography to the access to the employer benefits piece, is pretty interesting. I think folks listening certainly have got a lot to think about throughout the conversation. For folks who want to learn more, whether that's give it a try and see what it's like from the consumer side, potentially partners who have facilities like this, what's the best way to kind of get in touch or learn more?
Yeah, you can go to breakthelove.com and we have, you can sign up on our website. You can also reach out if you're looking to be a partner on, the provider side, right on our homepage and get started from there.
Awesome. It was a great conversation. I'm super excited to share it and follow along. And thanks for making time today.
Thanks so much, Joe.
One more thing before you head out, help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fit Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.